The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brudzinski. This is episode 4, February 15, 2018. Over there on my right, the one and only Ralph Tomaselli, the editor of the Record Journal, and a special guest in the studio, Gina Morgenstein, the freshman Democratic town councilor. Gina, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show.
Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on your election victory this past November.
Thank you.
All right. So some things we want to talk to you about is kind of an insider with the Democratic Town Committee. I mean, there's things are happening now on elections on the state and even on the national level, and you've got a good look at all this kind of stuff. But there have been some changes, I understand, on the Democratic Town Committee as a result of recent town committee elections. What's going on?
Yeah, so we had our caucus in January, and the caucus is Republican and Democrat, go together every 2 years, and new people can join. And we have 9 districts in Wallingford. We're a very big, very diverse town. And so an ad goes in the paper, and people know about it, and people talk about it, and people come to each middle school, to their district, come in a classroom, and say, I want to be a member. And you might have just enough people, you might have more people, and you have a vote amongst the people that have shown up. And we had a very active election season for our town committee.
Yeah, so I want to get specific in just a minute, but the Democrats sort of do it on their own, and the Republicans have another night, and they do it on their own.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes in the past, and maybe the distant past, the Democrats kind of scramble to get a lot of people, and it may be tough. This year, what was the reaction?
This year, we had a huge turnout. We have had such a growth of all people, a lot of them women, who have been activated in this last year. The national scene certainly has brought people to realize that things can change and action is needed. I attribute a lot of the women coming out to the Women's March, which I attended in Washington. Standing room only, couldn't even move. Hundreds of thousands of people, and people came back to their towns and said, what can I do to make the changes that I want to see? And some people joined Indivisibility and Connecticut Action Now and all these different groups. And we've, over the last year, kind of distilled down to people finding where their niche is, what can they do to accomplish things. And some good bit of those people do that now by joining the town committee.
Ended up on the town committee.
Yeah, and there's even people who may not have had a room to join or may not have had the time to come and be as active, but are still involved in helping. It's really activating people.
Just to give people an idea of the numbers, so how many people were at the caucus and how many new members do you have?
So I think the Democratic Town Committee, we were not full. Larry has these numbers. I think we were in like the low 80s, and now we're in the high 90s. Mm-hmm. And my recollection is we have something like 36 new members, 22 of which are women.
So what happened to the men? So, is this March? Is that what's going on? I mean, seriously, what happened to the men?
What happened to the men? They're still around.
All right.
We're happy to put them to work. Right. Some would say women are the doers.
I would say that too.
Yeah,
I
the
would
women.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I have a theory on it.
Do you have a woman editor in your organization?
Well, we do have. We don't have a woman. Well, we have a woman. We have a woman who's our assistant publisher, who's the next person to.
You can rest your case for that.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I will rest.
Go ahead. I won't be on your back anymore about that.
But I think it goes back to something I've said on the show, which is, I've talked about myself being part of a group of people that the president constantly attacks, journalists.
Yeah.
And I think these groups of people, journalists, women, Latinos, I do think the president has motivated them in some ways.
Yeah. So, Gina, to be a little bit more specific, is it like the Access Hollywood tapes and the women's issues? I mean, there's a litany of issues that, healthcare, and more currently, it's Rob Porter, that guy in the White House that was accused of spousal abuse. Are these the examples of situations that women have been reacting to that led them to seek out the town committee?
I think the particulars of the sexual harassment, the workplace problems, are a symptom of a bigger cultural issue. And when it really comes right down to it, you've got mothers who are raising their children and looking and saying, what do I want for these children, and can I do like I did, stay, not home, I worked, but stay simply parenting in addition to the full-time job or whatever, people's work life is, and do that sort of thing later.
Yeah.
Well, they look and they say, later is already here. If I don't make some changes now, my children's future is really in trouble. And you've got women, Valerie Horsley running for her state senate. She's got 2 small kids at home.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to be doing this for her own, but for those kids.
So let's talk about how this translates into votes locally and on the state level, because that's where the local Democratic town committee has an impact, state level, locally. And you got a couple things going on. First of all, you have the governor's race. And I don't want to make the show about the governor's race, so just touch it lightly. But the town committees of all the towns send delegates to these conventions, and it's these town committee representatives that nominate or effectively nominate or elect the next governor, whether it's Republican or Democrat. But also on the state level. So reading the papers, I see that a young fellow, Dan Fontaine, is challenging Craig Fishbein. He's from the town committee, or just give us the background that you have about that challenge.
So the background on Dan, I met him in December at our holiday party, and he's been very active with the Working Families Party and Door to Door and Tax the Rich campaign, and very down to earth. We need working people to earn a living wage, have affordable health care, things that should cross every, Democrat, Republican, rich, poor, things that people need to survive and be well. And so here it is, 2 months later. I haven't known him very long, but I'm very excited. And he's got a good group of working people behind him as well, already out meeting the people.
Good. Ralph?
You yourself just ran a campaign and won election to the council for the first time. So going up against some names that were around longer than you, better known than you. So I guess your advice to somebody who's running against Craig Fishbein, what would be the advice you would give? You're running against a known quantity, someone who's held elected office before.
It's all about getting to know the people, getting to their door, having a discussion. And you can go to a door and right off the bat, they can think that you have opposite opinions. And when you start to talk about things that matter, you can find that it's not infrequent that you have things that you both care about.
But I think also too, in terms of Craig and his record, and his, what are the issues if you're running against somebody like Craig? I mean, what are the issues that you think you're highlighting, or what do you think are his track record that you think you'd highlight?
Well, Craig votes no every budget that has an increase. So last budget season, Craig had the chance to lower the increase in taxes. So because Craig always says, I have always voted no for a tax increase, this last go-around for the town council, his no didn't mean we didn't get a tax increase. It meant we did not get less of a tax increase. We got the higher mayor's budget tax increase. That right there, Craig is very much on principles of certain things, and they're not always holding to the idea that actually works for people.
So there's another David and Goliath thing going on here, and the Goliath being Craig Fishbein, just to look at the vote count, right? That's all I'm, that's, the vote count in the local elections. But Len Fasano has got a challenger coming out of Wallingford.
Yeah.
I mean, who can possibly defeat Len Fasano, right? He's a Senate Majority Leader. He's in the paper every other day or every third day if you read the Hartford Current.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Wallingford challenge of Len Fasano.
So Eileen McKean said a year or more ago, it is not right that no one ever challenges Len Fasano. Whatever it takes, the man has got to answer for his actions. And she has made it her business to see to it that he is challenged. And she's an interesting candidate. She's not your classic left
politician.
Yeah, not at all.
I don't know if that's a word you're from.
Right. She's certainly not a politician, and she's not, I don't think you could ever accuse her, some people will pull out that left-leaning Democrat. She has some difference, very down to earth, farm, gun, hunting. They eat what they kill, all their meat. And so you've got, a very interesting combination there, and she's a very, very smart woman who would serve us well. And her biggest thing is we have got to challenge the status quo there, and we have to force him to say what he stands for.
So later on in the year, we'll invite all the candidates on the show, so everyone get their licks in, so to speak. Interesting. There's other transitions going on in the Democratic Town Committee. It was reported in the paper that Jeff Knickerbocker, the former chairman, will not be seeking another term as chairman of the Democratic Town Committee. Robin Hetrick was quoted, hey, she's going to be the next chairman of the town committee in my view, but what's your view?
Well, certainly as of right now, I don't see that anyone else has stood forward. And Jeff supported her taking on that role, as have many of the town committee members.
Is there any there other than a transition? Is there a backstory or anything like that?
She was vice chair, treasurer. I think she's held every other position years ago, and had kind of stepped away for a bit as the kids, different things in her life were going on, and now she's come back. She's always been an asset with helping people to understand the SEEK rules. No, there's no big drama, which is great, you know.
So Ralph really wants to know this, and I'm going to ask on his behalf. So does the Democratic Town Committee be more feisty, more combative, or sort of steady as she goes? I mean, is there a personality from the news value end, right? I mean, you.
So you're asking me?
No, I'm asking.
Ralph,
on your behalf.
Ralph can't ask it himself.
I can't answer for the Democrat, and she's doing a good job.
Yeah.
So the fact is that there is a lot of energy. There is a lot of workers, and we've really worked very hard to avoid conflict, and I think we've done a good job.
Yeah, I met with the Republicans, but So I sent you guys a story, an opinion piece from The Economist magazine. I think it's the most recent issue of The Economist magazine, which, you know, from my prior comments, I think it's the best magazine in print that you can buy today. And it tells a story of the candidacy of Claire McCaskill, a senator running for re-election out of Missouri, which is a deep red state, and the trials and tribulations of Claire McCaskill and people like her that are running in red jurisdictions, that in order to get elected, they got to be moderates. And the question, the article raises the question is, have the Democrats forced out the moderates, forcing them to more left positions, endangering the likes of the Claire McCaskills of the world? I thought it was an interesting article and began to think, what's the voting profile of the area in Wallingford and around Wallingford? Is it red? Is it blue? Is it purple? You know, how does it lean? And how local Democrats would address the Claire McCaskill dilemma. Gina, you're a resident expert on it, having been, you know, knocking on thousands of doors over your candidacies. What do you think about that?
So we certainly have a larger unaffiliated population than we do either party. And so, yes, you don't always know, you know, what you're up against. But again, I would come back to the idea that the working people are who's paying the way in this country. And if you can simply have a conversation about health care and the cost of higher education and the need to provide for yourself and your family, we're all in that boat. So I think on the national stage, some would say that things have gone in a direction that has too much corporate influence.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you already started on my question, which is, I think one thing this article brings out is the notion that what do Democrats stand for beyond being against the president? And sometimes what we would call identity politics. But you started to define it, so keep going. What does the Democratic Party stand for in your mind?
So I think traditionally a Democratic Party stands for unions and workers, and we have seen that eroded. States like Wisconsin are a mess as far as any Democratic efforts are concerned, because the workers' rights have been eroded so deeply. So how many of us work? Most of us work, and there's been this energy toward giving the rep for what's costing everything to the, quote, takers. Okay, so you may have some people who are needing assistance, needing a leg up in order to get to be a worker. Well, where is the real problem?
Let's switch the focus to council, Wallingford Town Council business. There was a meeting of the Town Council on Tuesday, February 13. There's a little story about it on page A3 of the Record Journal on today, February 14. Council votes to shorten public comment periods, and that's the amount of time someone in the audience can go to the microphone and weigh in. Gina, report for us, if you would, as to the doings of the Town Council on that topic last night and where you stood on the issue.
So I was the only person that voted no.
And what was the issue that you were...
So the issue was on a voting matter, a discussion matter. The public, as it currently stood, would have 30 minutes. So if we're discussing anything, you know, peanut butter, you know, on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
You could come up and if there's 10 of you and you speak for 3 minutes, you know, there's your 30 minutes. The reality is that my sense of things is, well, you haven't been here a long time, and you'll soon realize that if we, you know, give them so much time, we're up here, and, you know, there's certain people that come up and they're yap, 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 and it's not really valuable.
So someone made a proposal to...
So a proposal was made. We had a workshop where the things that came up last night were things that had been workshopped and voted again voted on, okay, the consensus was cut it down to 20. And so
20 minutes
20 minutes
from
of total discussion from 30.
shortening it by 10 minutes.
By 10 minutes.
The public participation
yeah.
segment. Okay.
Right. And the reality is that I was the only person that saw that extra 10 minutes remaining to be valuable. And I'll give Chairman Cervoni, credit where it's due. He has still, in those rules, the ability to allow it to go longer. And if a discussion is going on that needs to go longer, he tends to. But I just think on the face of it, we need to say to the public, you are valued, and your thoughts, opinions, statements matter. And so just in principle.
So there was a symbolic message here as well as
Yeah.
a practical
Yeah.
one. The other half or part of this article written by Matt Zabrik reported on an issue that Ralph and I talked about it. And I think when Joe Marone was here, we talked about it. And that was a desire to get more financial reports from the town. Well, to get more information, I'm going to put it that way, about the current finances. And I think Joe's proposal when he was here and to the council was a monthly agenda item devoted to finances. What happened to that?
So what happened to that? Joe had brought it up in the workshop. Joe was not there last night. And I raised the idea, I used the word summary, and I was told that a summary is what we have, and it's 100 pages long. So someone came up with a better term, I can't recall now what it was, but more of what I would see as valuable is something brief, sort of an assessment. And it did catch fire, the idea that having trends, seeing each month what was happening. Now, the mayor felt very strongly, and rightly so. You might be, the public works, and in February you've got big expenses because of snow. In summer you've got, different expenses. So you can't say, oh, we're 3/4 of the way through the year, we've spent 75%. It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
It's not a mathematical straight line. There's peaks and valleys in expenditures. Yeah.
But the point being, when it comes to budget season in April, if every month there has been something provided that allows us to have had 11 or 12 items that lead up to that, that would be useful. And the mayor did indicate that Mr. Bowes could be asked to see about giving something like that, but it didn't make it into the public
into the rules. Yeah.
Right.
Ralph?
I thought it was a really reasonable request that Joe Marone was making. I had my doubts about whether it would come to fruition because, and Gina was there, and so she'll keep me in line here, but because quite often it seems that the Republicans, Vin Cervoni, Tom Laffin, others, are just hesitant to push the mayor on anything like this.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there, and so is that the way it went down, Gina, or is that?
I'm not sure who in the room, but certainly there was a flavor in the room that this is a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, they did not want it as part of a rule. Again, the public inputting on this carried a certain flavor, but as far as getting it done to happen to us, there was definitely a favorability toward that.
But then if there's all this agreement, why couldn't something formal be voted on that the mayor would have to come back with every month? Rather, it was kind of left at that it's, once again, isn't it really up to the mayor whether he wants to do this or not?
Well,
Or maybe that's not and I want you to characterize
well, my take on it was the mayor was saying, yeah, that could be looked at, and my thing was, well, then I'll go talk to Mr. Bowes myself. Yeah.
So that's not too bad of a result, in that an idea that Joe had for a monthly sort of a structured, fixed place on the agenda was a long shot anyway. In view of the factors that you outlined, a minute ago, that morphed into the mayor saying, okay, we'll come back and see what kind of our term, executive summary, might be available. And it's up to the council to carry that forward. Jason Zandri pointed out during that discussion that any councilor at any time could put a discussion on the current finances on the agenda, that it didn't have to be structured. I think actually it was Vinny Testa that was a little wary that members of the public might abuse the discussion and sort of pick apart minutia that made wasn't it didn't matter to anybody. Mm-hmm. I think part of the problem that the council has is they've got to sort of agree as a body as to what they want and in what format. What do they want Jim Bowes to do? And I think as you and I talked about, I sense, although we didn't really define this very well either, I think the council wants some grounding. Are we doing okay? Are we falling into the hole? Do we have to cut expenses? Are revenue sources like grants disappointing? Or the other, are we saving money that we didn't expect? Are the grants coming through more full than we thought? Do we have more wiggle room? And I don't think there's any intention of micromanaging or spending any more money, but I think they just, to their credit, want to be more fully informed. I sense that's really all it is. And then there are many ways that I think Jim Bowes can put that together very briefly with a very quick, discussion. Gina, you got the final thoughts on my comments?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly. So where are we going? How are we moving? I've not done a budget yet, but I would imagine that if you're doing the budget and you're getting into the minutia, if you have seen some of that minutia over the year, yes, there's 100 pages you could dig through once a month, but if you really have something that it gives it to you in a more usable form, then when you come to budget time, I would think you've got more to start from.
So on February 5, the Record Journal, that was a Monday, the Record Journal ran a story that said Wallingford councilors vote 5-2 to keep prayer to open meetings, meaning the council voted 5-2 to open the meetings with a prayer. You and I discussed that at some lengths with Joe Marone the other day. Gina, you were the initiator of the idea that a moment of silence, I think, there should be a change from the prayer before every meeting, and you were joined by Chris Shortell. Tell us what happened and the basis for your vote.
So, yes, I brought this up at the rules meeting, and I thought long and hard about this. I talked with a variety of people before I began on the council about this, because I had been sitting for prayer all these years I've been attending meetings.
When others would stand.
Right. So you do the Pledge of Allegiance, you do the prayer, and important to know that it's not as if from the beginning of Wallingford there's been prayer at town council meetings. I believe it's about 2010, and it went back and forth a couple of times where it was on, then it was off, then it was on again. And so we're not talking, the Constitution.
Yeah.
And I do not believe that a government meeting is the place for a prayer. And whether or not I say a prayer, don't say a prayer, am part of a religion is not part of being at a government meeting, and something that should be open to the public and encouraging the public to attend. It doesn't belong there.
So you took a real political risk there. How's that working out, or is it irrelevant how it worked out? You stuck to your guns? And
I mean, the fact is, I guess, I'm not on the council to forever be on the council. I have a full-time job. I have a busy life. If it were to cost me that many votes, which I don't believe it would, so be it. I got my first hate phone call out of it.
There you go.
Yeah, early in my career here. Yeah, I should leave the country.
Yeah. Ralph?
Well, I think that when we talked about it on last show.
Yeah.
I think that Joe Marone and yours truly made the point that we were okay with a prayer. Mm-hmm. We were okay with my preference might be a moment of silence, but that we certainly respected and even admired someone for bringing it up. And I noted that there's an op-ed running in the Record Journal on Thursday, as we tape this on Wednesday, right,
Yes,
Mike?
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
From a Wallingford rabbi, and he opens up the op-ed by saying that he admired and respected the fact that Gina brought it up. So
Yeah.
I think you're going to get a lot of that too.
There was another issue. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Another issue that's come up. As reported at the beginning of February, the Wallingford Grand List, it kind of ended flat. It was down by $26 million, which isn't a ton, but it certainly didn't go up. We know from past news stories that the level of state grants is depressed, and it probably will be depressed here on out,
Right.
because the state hasn't solved any of its problems. Costs keep going up. Wages are subject to contract, and they go up 2-3% a year, depending on what's going on. We have the Bristol-Myers problem. That, we're going to lose tax money out of that. There's a story that I want you to report on in a second. But Gina, the question to you is: in the past, not every year, but in the past, from time to time, it seems that Democrats on the town council or Democrats weighing in that maybe they're not on the town council want to have a tax freeze. They don't want an increase in the mill rate, and they sort of wrestle with that. But in view of all the forces coming to bear, you're going to have a budget season come in April 1. Are you the frame of mind to go into that with a predisposition towards a tax freeze, no rise in the mill rate? Is that where you're at?
The reality is that we, for this year, are seeing, worse economic times, not just for the town, not just for the state, but for the residents. And so given where we are with our funds, we know that we're going to be presented, each department is presented with keep your budget flat, but their personnel costs, their insurance costs all go up. And so we know that we're going to be facing the same situation as ever. Cut this, cut this, cut this in order to be flat or increase.
Well, I want to cut to the quick here, but so if someone asked you for a promise, no mill rate increase, would you promise?
I can't say that I would promise, but my leaning, not having done it before and going into it as we are now, is that the town should be looking at its resident situation and not raising their taxes. They have been raised at least the last 5 years. I think it may be 10.
Oh, forever, I think.
And so now we're really in trouble, and it's the residents who it's on the backs of. So yes, that would certainly be my goal.
I think I get the answer. What do you have in mind?
Well, the thing I think that I'd point out is that the question was, are you in favor of, not an increase in the mill rate, which is a common question.
Oh, it comes up all the time.
It comes up all the time. And the thing about it, I think, the comment I'd make is this. School board budgets, for the most part, in the towns we cover, at least the superintendent's proposals are already out. And even in these difficult times, most superintendents are asking for somewhere between 2 to 4% increase.
And in Wallingford, that's 60% or so of the budget.
And it just reminded me that really, if you are in favor of not raising taxes locally, it's really how the school teacher's contract is handled in some ways. Or maybe I'm oversimplifying. Because the minute, it's like a chess game. The minute you vote for a 2 to 3% wage increase for teachers, which I'm not arguing against. I can understand how people vote for it. Now you're almost checkmated, because now you're in a position where if you're going to not raise taxes, you really have to lay off teachers. And politically, that's a difficult road to go down. So I just...
While you're on a roll here, all right, I want, if you would, to report to us on what you guys have found out, and it's going to be in the RJ,
right?
But about the Bristol-Myers situation.
Yeah, okay, Mike.
And then I want to get Gina on the
Yep,
conversation,
and
the consequences for
Okay,
Wallingford. Yeah.
and you're right, because this is important for
Yeah.
the tax rate, too. Okay, so a Massachusetts-based real estate firm
Okay.
purchased the Bristol-Myers Squibb property today, Wednesday, as we speak, and they purchased it for $5 million. A building that was on the market for as much as $50 million, so that's quite a difference there. But I think the thing that is important for local taxpayers is this, and this comes from Shelby Jackson, the town assessor. He said the sale will not impact the tax appeal settlement that the town and Bristol-Myers reached. And the reason that tax appeal settlement is important is because it set the value of the property at $46 million for 2017, 2018, and 2019. So despite the fact that the property sold for much less than that, I think the town has some certainty in revenue from that property.
Gina,
Wow.
is that putting lipstick on a pig?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. That's such a huge difference. So presumably they got this good price because they know they're going to have a big tax bill? Bristol-Myers could take the hit? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's very risky. I think very risky for Wallingford. I think the weight of forces is that this new buyer is going to have another tax appeal, and the assessment is going to go down. Right. If we assume that the $5 million reflected market value, now people may not agree to that, but it's been on the market for a long time. You know, the Bristol-Myers property. The town interfered with one sale by blocking sale to a international school. We don't know what the purchase price of that would have been. I'll bet it was more than $5 million, but we don't, and we'll never know because it's a matter of national security in Wallingford not to reveal that price, right? Because they don't want to be embarrassed. But it's a matter of, it's closely guarded secret. But after this agreement that the town has with Bristol-Myers to set the assessment for the years 17, 18, and 19, all bets are off the table. And if I was the owner of that Bristol-Myers property, I'd march right into court and say, we offered 5, that's the market value, and we want a reduction. And it's going to happen, in my view, it's going to happen. The occupancy of that Bristol-Myers building, as big as it is, I don't think can go so fast and so far as to accumulate a lot of taxable personal property to make up in the loss of real estate. Gina, this would be a challenge for you guys.
Yeah.
You know, to say, oh, this is just not the wrong time to freeze taxes. Let's change the subject a titch. The story, I like this story. It has to do with the building department.
Yes.
This was in the paper on February 11th, Sunday. By golly, was this the front page? I think it might have been, Ralph. Front page. The headline is "Backlog Has Department Seeking Help," and this had to do with the Wallingford Building Department. The story says, and the council material says that they were having trouble keeping their, wait for it, filing up to date. Okay, they're keeping their filing up to date, and they got to get some temporary help to, as we learn, microfilm. And you're gasping in horror. Microfilm a lot of these records. Gina, what's your takeaway from this story?
Yeah. You brought this story to my attention. The Sunday paper is not in my purview all the time. I'm going to have to learn that it needs to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Microfilm, yes. So the question I have, how many hours does it take to put records onto a microfilm, and then how do you look at it? And how long might it take to scan documents? And it's mind-blowing.
It is kind of mind-blowing, and I hope you guys take it up during budget time as to the real story and why these documents aren't going up into the cloud for storage. And once they're in microfilm, how can they be easily retrieved And the example I used with you over the phone, if I want to, march into the building department and check the inspection records or the building records of the Record Journal building, you're in Wallingford, right? Or are you in Meriden?
We're in Meriden.
Okay,
right?
well, let's pretend for this that you're in Wallingford. Would they be able to pull it up on a computer real quick? Would they be able to email me stuff real quick? Or would I have to wait while they search through their microfilm drawer and say, well, the phone is ringing, come back tomorrow? Would they be able to email me stuff? It seems totally unworkable, and the town is investing all this money in an old technology that doesn't serve anybody particularly well. But I have another question,
Sure.
and my question is, how do we know that? Let me back up. There's some background context in this story about the number of permits issued every year, okay? And it seemed to say that the number of permits has increased dramatically, yet the town was understaffed. And so we're led to believe that this understaffing and a huge increase in permits, which led to a filing problem, how do we know it didn't infect other portions of the mission, other parts of the mission of the building department? And how do we know there aren't contractors that are not pulling permits because they're faced with a delay? And the mayor saying that, oh, well, we're current has no credibility with me because I don't know what that means, I don't know. Gina, is this just something I'm, I'm talking about, or is this a concern?
Well, I think it's a symptom of a much bigger issue, which we all know exists, that we are so behind in any technology that the cost to catch up is just huge. And my understanding is that you have departments that need computer and internet access that have it, and others, if the state doesn't deem it necessary, they don't. And does that mean that we're paying, an internet connection for each department separately? So if your house and my house and Ralph's house each pay a separate internet bill, but we're part of a larger organization, might we not save money if it was all connected and there were a network and there were a scanner and the cloud?
Come April, you'll have a chance to ask those questions if you can shake an answer out of the tree. April being the budget season, Ralph.
Well, we've talked about it so many times, but I mean, even if you got an answer and shook something out of the trees, I think what's important for people to understand is, under the form of government we have in Wallingford, there's not a lot the council can do. I mean, this is an administrative matter. This is, the mayor runs these departments, and if there's something I've missed along the way, point it out to me.
No, you haven't missed it, but that's the Vinnie Cervoni argument, frankly. No sense in taking it up, discussing it, debating it, confronting it, nudging people along, leading and guiding, because there's nothing we can do, so let's not even bring it up. That's sort of been, the Cervoni laughing mantra over the, we have to talk to the mayor privately because he won't listen to us publicly. Do you remember discussing?
Absolutely.
No,
and I didn't
so
mean
here's
to give up on it.
No, I know. So what the council can do, all 9 of them can say, this is absolutely ridiculous, and we're putting $50,000 into the building department budget. Mayor, veto it if you want. Craig will vote no. So that's 8 councilors can get together. We're putting $50,000 in the building department budget, hire somebody else, and get these records online, because contractors suffer no fools. And if they need an inspection of the electrical, the plumbing, the structure, they don't need it next week. They need it like tomorrow when they call. They're those contractors an independent lot, So I mean, that's the lecture that has to be given. And if all of them stick together, the mayor will pound the table. But you do it year after year after year, and something I hope would change.
Right, and I think that's
my sermon for the.
No, and I'm going to give a really quick sermon, which is that what as a resident of this town, this technology experience has been so bad for me, so wasteful, that it's made me view the notion of a town manager I would have never, before this technology issue, I was happy with this mayoral form of government, but this has completely turned me the other way. I want a professional manager. I want to elect 9 people to tell that professional manager at times what to do and what not to do. And I don't want to leave it to the chance of, who I happen to elect. If this person has an aversion like this to technology or any other, part of modern life, I just don't want to risk it again.
Gina?
Yeah. I mean, if this were the early 1900s, we wouldn't be driving cars in Wallingford. We'd be, on horseback.
Board of Education.
Yes, go ahead.
Board of Education. Let's talk about that very briefly. It's always a mystery to me because no one wants to talk on Board of Ed. Well, maybe it's not your experience.
No, I understand. But I thought maybe. Go ahead. Keep going with that. 2 stories.
I put them together, and I got a big question mark. And I'm going to throw it to you, and then to Gina. February 8th, front page above the fold. Yes. Board Eye School Building Options. I read the story a couple times, and I thought. The content in there is much overrated. I don't think the board and the superintendent and the administrators and the teachers are really seriously considering anything really radical. But in order to establish that, they got to pay $60,000 for a study. And I think that's what I think is going on is the superintendent wants to say, you guys said in your plan of conservation development to analyze and study and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to waste my time on doing it, but I'll be happy to spend $60,000 to get it done. I don't think it's, the issue is that serious. And also coming out of the Board of Ed, they're hiring, or they want to hire more social workers or psychologists, I think, but cut some teachers. So I put this all together, and I'm not saying hiring psychologists or social workers is a bad thing. No. I just don't know the reason. I don't know what the problem is. And I guess if I go to enough Board of Ed meetings and Parent Teachers Association meetings, maybe I'll learn. But it's just a strange combination of events. Gina, your thoughts, because you've got to approve a board budget,
Yeah, not my area yet. I need it to become so, but yeah, teaching seems to be what we need, and we have so many mandates and so many pressures. And of course, children can't learn if they're struggling in other ways. So I don't have a lot of background in it, but it's really, if you go to the studying for a new building or reno of existing, we are spending a fortune on repairing buildings that are very old and, very energy inefficient. And I've heard a figure like 5 years. If you're even going to look in it, you have to start 5 years ahead. So I think in planning for any kind of a future, that study does need to happen.
Well, the only thing I'd point out is this, and I've watched this for a number of years now.
Yeah.
Superintendent of schools, Sal Menzo, puts out his budget first.
Sure.
He puts it out, and then I think that he's very good at highlighting some of the issues that he'd like highlighted publicly. For example, the budget comes out, and the theme of the budget was, we are dealing, I know money is tight, but we are dealing with things with children in schools that we've never had to deal with before. And, that was the theme of his budget. It was also, then all of a sudden there's stories about new programs to teach empathy in the schools. A follow-up on school psychologists. And we're doing the story, so I'm not in any way blaming Mr. Menzo. I'm saying that
he'll feed you whatever you'll eat.
Right,
I'll tell you.
He's very good at his message.
Just saying.
Right, and the building message, you make an excellent point. That, he puts this building issue out there. It looks as though he's open to all suggestions, even tearing down Lyman Hall and Sheehan or whatever else he has to do.
Seriously, go ahead.
And so, again, I'm not necessarily agreeing with it. I'm just
Yeah.
making the point. I think he does very well in getting messages out this time of year that he'd like to get out.
Okay. So at the back of the story, it says one of the issues brought up during the workshops was the possibility of considering the district's 2 high schools into one as a way to save money. In that scenario, the district would have to build a new high school because neither Lyman Hall or Sheehan High School is big enough to fill the student population, school officials have said. Now, what a false trail that's on. Someone brought up the possibility, and it's not a real possibility in our lifetime.
Right.
In our lifetime, it's not going to happen with all the. But it keeps cropping up, into these things as well, that's a possibility when it's really not a possibility. At least that's in my humble IMHO in my humble opinion. So I'm a little skeptical about this, and I think what Sal Menzo should have done on this study, they should have gone back to the town and mainly the Planning and Zoning Department, which was kind of the sponsor of the Plan of Conservation Development, said if you want a $60,000 study, you put it in your budget.
Right. Good point.
Because this is for, we know what we're doing. We don't need the study. This is something you imposed.
Right.
So some of the ideas, I'm off on a tangent, but I'm going to stop in just a minute. Some of the ideas in the Plan of Conservation Development didn't have the funding source as part of the conversation. Like the mayor hardly ever went to these meetings, if ever, and never weighed in, on whether he would be in favor of funding some of these ideas that cost money. And now we find out the study, which I think the superintendent could do, dictating off the top of his head, which would satisfy the requirements of whatever he thinks he has to do. He could dictate it off the top or delegate it to, one of his many administrators.
Great.
Gina just chuckled that many administrators is kind of an inside joke.
Right.
Because there's supposed to be a lot of administrators. Gina, your thoughts on my sermonizing there?
Many administrators, yeah. It is what I heard going door to door from teachers, former educators, that the school system has really gotten very top-heavy in administrators, middle management. There are certainly a lot of mandates and funding that comes from mandates, but come budget season, that's one of the things I want to look at is what is that structuring of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make that the final word. Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. Gina, again, congratulations on your election.
Thank
My
you. condolences
for what's ahead of you, because these are probably more difficult times than I can remember in recent history. But good luck to you, and
Thank you.
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning into the Citizen Mike Show. We do appreciate it. We're here on Wednesday afternoons, but the WPAA has a Citizen Mike Show on Thursdays, Fridays, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays at 9 o'clock. And also, you can find the Citizen Mike Show on YouTube. If you're familiar with YouTube, just search the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel and stuff will pop up, and follow the instructions and be able to see it on your computer. Yes, you will. But hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Thanks for tuning in.